Hi, everybody. I'm going to hit this gavel just to be official. Welcome to the Council Committee of the Whole. This is a special meeting. It is Wednesday, April 2nd, 6 p.m. Addie, would you please call the roll?
Cobb.
Here.
Kuda.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Here. Posh.
Here. All right, so we have 6 or 7 agenda items here, and we'll get to those in a minute. I'm going to just kind of, pardon me? So I'm going to kind of do that first, and then I'll tell you where we're headed after that. So first of all, I want to thank you, Councilman Posh and Petrus, for calling this special meeting. I certainly join you in your concern about recent events, news articles, like the ones in the Akron Beacon Journal and the Scene, and the public records request that we've seen that followed the resignation of our city administrator, Dan Horrigan, after only 2.5 months. Mr. Horrigan is the 3rd city administrator to resign in the past 3 years, sorry, not quite that bad. And Mr. Horrigan is the 12th director level employee to lead this administration in the past 3+ years. I believe he was a well-qualified city administrator doing a great job. And full disclosure, I want to say that I have spoken at length with Mr. Horrigan since he resigned. He was more than forthcoming about the circumstances, but he did speak with me on the condition of confidentiality, which I will certainly honor. I will say, however, after speaking with Mr. Horrigan, I became considerably more concerned about the work atmosphere that he described and than I even was when I read the article in the Akron Beacon Journal. The news reports about workplace safety, a hostile work environment, and access to City Hall and its offices by a family member, along with Mr. Horrigan saying he did not want to be complicit in the present workplace atmosphere, again, all causes for concern. Because the Horrigan resignation is a personnel issue, I have asked the mayor if we could talk about this in executive session, and the mayor told me he has chosen to do an internal investigation and inform council and the public when it is completed. Perhaps the mayor can explain later what the internal investigation would be about and why he prefers to do it that way. So why are we here? What authority does council have? What do we want to accomplish at this particular meeting? And, maybe we'll decide that this is just the beginning or, but we'll wait and see how this plays out. We're here because council has the right to call a special meetings. That's in our charter. Council has the authority to look at legislative remedies to problems like safety, security, and access to City Hall and its offices by non-employees. Council has the authority, and I would argue the responsibility, to make inquiries of the administration under Article 3, Section 6 of the Charter, our so-called oversight authority. And I'm assuming that there will be questions from our members. Council may have investigatory powers in the Ohio Revised Code, and I'm going to talk about this later when we talk about item 4 on the agenda. We're also here because the residents are demanding to know what's going on. The mayor has said relatively little about this, but we're getting emails, calls, lots of stuff on social media. So we're trying to be responsive. We're here because we care about the employees, and in some cases, former employees, some of whom have said very disturbing things about what is going on here, but fear retribution. We're also here because there is no way we could have possibly fit this on our regular meeting agenda on Monday, and there just simply isn't enough time. Now, clearly the mayor has executive authority over all city staff, but that still leaves questions about the aforementioned issues of safety, security, and access to City Hall, and council's role, position, if you will, if the mayor were to appoint another city administrator. Finally, the shift to an elected mayor brought with it, I believe, the expectation of a more accountable, responsive government. The buck stops here kind of thing. And in my view, based on the residents who've reached out to me, they don't think they're getting that. But maybe we can remedy that tonight by asking questions and getting answers. And by answers, I don't mean pending lawsuits or HR grievances. I mean about the issues of access, safety, security, both for employees and about this building itself. So what I'd like to do now is, if anybody wants a couple minutes, and I'm going to have Addie time it, to say anything before we do, go through the agenda. If you want to say anything in addition to why you think we're here, I mean, the two of you, Jim and Jim, called this meeting. I mean, I don't want to be the only one that says why I think we're here. Yeah. Anybody? I mean, don't feel like you have to.
Well, maybe I should mention why I thought the meeting was important. We have to abide by the sunshine laws. We can't chatter amongst ourselves. I thought it was important for us to have a meaningful conversation about these items and what we can do in council's role to do it. I mean, we legislate, the mayor and his administration run and execute. I mean, that's a roundabout summary. And we have budget authority and we've got some oversight authority. But the issue here is, with all the unused budget monies last year, with the fact that we know that we have HR problems, I mean, what can we do as a council to try to solve this? And I want to collaborate with all you guys to figure that out. So.
That's good. Anybody else? All right, so I'm just going to go through the agenda. The first item is discussion of the regulation of City Hall access and confidential information. So I'll just open it up to anybody who would like to speak first.
I think the law director should be able to tell us that information.
Well, I mean, I would ask Director Hanna, could you research council's authority to legislate limits on non-employees' access to City Hall and its offices? Because I mean, I haven't done that, and then maybe present something at the next meeting.
That's something we can look into. Yeah, I'm not prepared to speak on that authoritatively tonight.
When you say authoritatively, you mean whether or not we have the authority to?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to provide an oral, comprehensive legal opinion on the ultimate resolution of that.
But the research you could do. Go ahead.
So, these are some of my concerns. So when you're looking at this, clearly, from what we've heard, and maybe it's not true, but when you have a family member that is working here on a regular basis and conducting business, there needs to be a level of transparency when city business is being conducted. There needs to be ways of looking at emails. So when a family member works here, I mean, even though that the family member is unpaid, is there email access? Is there communications? Is there any memos? Is anything documented? I mean, this is transparent, and there needs to be a record of these kinds of things.
When you say a record of these kinds of things, I apologize for interrupting, but what kinds of things are you referring to?
I'll give you an example, and it's on the agenda later today. It's the Burgess and Burgess contract and work that Burgess is doing for the city, is the family member involved in that work and directing, and is there reporting that's being shared with the family member? This is all this work is a public record. I mean, is there situations set up where when a public information request is made, that information can be accessed? There's people who in this city that have informed me they have submitted public records requests regarding that work, and they're not getting any responses back. So the question is, are they not getting any responses back just because there's nothing there that can be gleaned from that information because there's no city record of that information on an email system or a hard drive or notes for a meeting or whatever it may be?
So typically, just with respect to that last piece, there aren't necessarily public records minutes that are generated as a result of every meeting that may occur internally.
Mhm.
And so when you say that people are submitting requests, I know there have been a lot of requests. The law department's working to turn those around. A lot of them are for emails, and they involve lots and lots of search terms and long periods of time, and the numbers of documents that are potentially responsive are incredible. So it takes a lot of time. So hopefully people are getting, in every case, an acknowledgement, and then if there are no records that are responsive to that request, they're going to be advised of that. If there are records that are responsive, they would be provided if they're public record by nature and not subject to redaction or exemption, et cetera. And if they are, then that's the reasons for that are spelled out. But I think and this is just for purposes of clarification, I thought I heard you say a moment ago that there would be, all of these are public record. They're certainly all public business, but there isn't always a record in every case. I just wanted to make that point.
Well, I agree, but if you're an if you're an HR director, for example, you have, and some of that, maybe HR director is a bad example because a lot of that information is privileged. Maybe you're a communications director and you're working with a contract and you get a deliverable, but it's delivered not to the city, it's delivered to a family member. I mean, that deliverable is really a city deliverable. My specific question is the reason why maybe the residents who have asked for this information are not getting it is because the city's not getting that information, maybe a spouse's or a family member's. The issue here is there's just so many unknowns with this, and it's concerning to me. There's issues regarding VPN access. Everybody here on the city is on the VPN, except for me. But does a family member have access to the VPN? Or even we were mentioning key cards. What's the policy when it comes to key cards? We certainly are allowed to have visitors. We're allowed to have family members in our place of work and visit. What's the key card access policy?
Could we ask the mayor that question? I think that you could answer it better than anybody.
Okay, I don't know that I can,
Just the key card part.
what's the key card access policy?
Yes.
There are a few specific areas of the city, in the city government, that are restricted. Very few. And those restrictions, for instance, my key card does not open those areas, for one. That would include the detective bureau, the police department on the lower level. That would include the courts, incidentally, and the law department. So other than that, I don't believe that there's any restricted access, anything with the exception of people's locked files, which people are required to have secured. And that is for a variety of reasons, including, and this, I guess, probably goes without saying for some of you who have worked in an office, people who are not potentially working in the law department, but are doing custodial work throughout the city, have access to pretty much everywhere in the city, including the courts. We have a special contract for the jail in particular. I believe that the detective bureau, for specific reasons, is more off limits than anywhere else in the city. But other than that, I believe we have cleaning crews coming through and doing that work, and that's why sensitive files are kept locked. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would assume that the employee handbook covers employees.
I invite you to, the employee handbook is on our website in the HR section.
Well, let me ask my question. And I would assume it doesn't cover non-employees. So what would be the rule for non-employees to have key card access to City Hall, any of its offices? If you're not an employee,
Okay, what's the policy in the
yeah,
employee
so,
handbook?
yeah, because I would assume there's nothing in there. I mean, I would assume the employee handbook is for employees.
Okay, I'm gonna, actually, the most recent revision of the employee handbook was done by the law director and former HR director, so I'll turn it over to the law director to respond to any key card access sections.
So as I said to the president of council earlier, I can speak to those things more authoritatively at a future time. And I can assure there was no revisions to any security policy or anything like that in that last revision.
However, I do invite all of you and anybody in the watching public to, our employee handbook is on the website. You can find it if you go to the HR section of our website and take a look through it.
Well, again, I think the concern, and I'm glad you're going to look this up, but the concern I think is non-employees having access. Go ahead, Councilman Cobb.
Speaking of the employee handbook, when all of these allegations surfaced following that article in the Akron Beacon Journal, I did go and look through our employee handbook as well as look through the city code and the charter to find out what provisions may or may not be applicable to the situation. And there is nothing in the employee handbook that addresses the use of key cards by anyone that's not an employee. There's very little said, in fact, about key cards. The only mention of it is identification badges, and there shouldn't be any misuse of those. But I think as someone indicated, it's always termed as to employees. There is nothing in here that addresses a situation where you have a visitor that is having a key card or using a key card or using any city property. To go to an earlier question that you asked about, and the law director needs to do some research, I would ask him to take a look specifically at our ordinance in chapter 121.05. And there are provisions in there that provide that the mayor shall have care, control, and use of all city property. So, and I'm not the law director, I'm a lawyer, but I would defer to the law director to the extent that there are city ordinances addressing that. If council wants to amend any of these city ordinances to specifically restrict the use of city property and empower council to have some authority over that, I believe that we can do that.
That is, Councilman, the type of thing that I would envision looking at. There's provisions in the Parks and Rec, Parks and Properties areas that speak to this. There's provisions in 121 that speak to this, but I haven't collected them all.
Right. So the default position under our current ordinances empowers the mayor to be in control of the city property.
Sure.
And I don't see anything in the charter that prohibits council from taking over that control or authority. In the same vein, chapter 121.05 gives the mayor the authority to establish rules and regulation governing conduct and performance of employees. Again, that suggests that there may be some ability by council to weigh in on that subject to the extent that it doesn't conflict with the executive powers and authority that are conveyed to the mayor under the charter.
So just to be clear, I'd like to hear what the law director, finds in his research. I was just looking as do we have the right to restrict non-employees? Although I would like to see the gamut of what we could do, but that's the question I'm asking. Go ahead.
We're dealing with something that's never occurred,
Right.
at least in my time in Cleveland Heights, where there were no rules envisioned or anticipated for having to address this situation that has been alleged to be occurring. No one envisioned that any rules or regulations would ever be necessary because I think that the norms of behavior didn't anticipate something like this happening. So we're in new ground and territory here for in the time that I've been involved in the city government. This is all new.
And that's why we're here. Go ahead, Councilman.
I know you stated that you looked through the employee handbook. I just had a couple quick questions just on the margins of the conversation we're having. I know you stated you didn't see anything around employees, so there's a couple questions I had. Did you see anything, not just security-based, but around like logins for anything systems? Was that separate? That wasn't connected? Is my first question.
I didn't see anything addressing the computer situation. My sense is that this handbook was essentially, used from prior templates, which were drafted before there were
Technology and those
computers and
extensions.
technology and key cards.
That leads me to my next question. I was also, did you see any separate policy for, give you an example, for contractors or hires or anything? Like, give you an example, I was wondering if there were any policies like around Mr. Phelps, for instance, in the work that he was doing, or any access or logins or things like that, or if that would all have been included in that. I didn't know if there was something separate that you particularly saw. I did not, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I did not. I would believe that a contracted employee would be subject to the same, even though they're not technically an employee, would be subject to the same rules as governing a city employee. The same as if I believe that you have any vendors or anyone that's doing business with the city should be bound to conform their behavior to anything that is set forth in the employee manual.
That leads me to my third point. In what you saw, did you see anything that speaks to, and this is just something as I'm thinking about, not necessarily our employees, but our contracted folks, like for instance, for our programs in like the rec center, what are we putting them under? I was just curious if they're all lumped under that same set of expectations. That's why as we're fleshing this out, I was just thinking about the fact that we have those outside folks coming and doing that work. What does that look like? Where do you draw the line with that as a separate handbook? So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Since you were in it, I was just wondering that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else on this item? I think, the law director is going to take a look at two things. One is, do we have the ability to do this? And two, that particular 12105, and perhaps, something in the future with the employee handbook would be in line. Anybody else on this topic? All right, so the next one is discussion of employee workplace safety, security, and retention issues. Councilman?
I hate to be starting out first each time here. So I'm going to read an excerpt from a email memo sent from Dan Horgan to the mayor. Your wife's presence here at City Hall has caused a number of employees to feel uncomfortable and on at least one occasion unsafe. Quite frankly, her directing staff in their official capacity is improper and unethical. I'm going to jump to the next paragraph here. Given the current situation, for me to continue my current role, I'm requesting that your wife discontinue her presence here at City Hall and refrain from directing City Cleveland Heights staff in their work capacity. So, these are pretty difficult words, I'm sure, for you to read, Mayor, and for Dan to put forth here. And this is the crux of the issue. And I believe the crux of what the city is looking for. It doesn't matter to me that a family member comes in and aids and assists and provides guidance. But this almost seems like this has crossed the line. And from a city, and in the spirit of trying to protect the city, we've had 12 major directors leave the city. I mean, we're concerned about this. I mean, we don't feel like work can get, I can't speak for we, I feel like the city can't move forward without having continuity in the workplace, and these allegations are beyond just having your wife visit your place of employment and give you guidance. So what what I would have hoped to see, like in that Scene magazine, was answers to like the core crux to the problem. It just seemed like a lot of words, but nothing that really answered the core problem.
Is there a question in your opinion?
Of course, there's a question there for you. I mean, maybe it's something you don't want to answer, but this is. I mean, is this behavior going to continue, and are we going to continue losing more employees because of this?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think first, I'd like to caution you against conflating two completely separate issues. One, it seems as though you are making an assumption that people who have, for instance, left to pursue career opportunities, and as in the case of Joe McCray, moving on as the COO of the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, or Joe Sinnott, who was given an offer to develop the first economic development department for Erie County by the county executive there. Conflating, disparate reasons for people leaving, just like people have different reasons for joining the team. You're conflating that with a particular set of allegations by somebody who was here for a very short period of time. And I would like to speak directly to those allegations, but before that, I'd like to again caution you as well. In the same way that this is going to likely be a relatively long meeting, I don't imagine that Channel 5 will air the entire thing, right? There will be portions that they will air. There will be portions that they will put on the television, and that's fine. It's a news station. It's similar to a news article, as you've referenced, where you believe that I did not address this allegation that the First Lady was directing staff, when in fact I did. And I can reiterate what I told Mr. Oprea. At no point has my wife directed staff. In fact, was very careful to express that her opinions are not the opinions of the mayor on very, very many occasions, to bring that point home in a very direct and deliberate way. So I imagine that that answers your question, and it will not be reiterated throughout the course of this meeting. Does everybody understand the answer to the question?
So you're basically saying Dan Horgan was incorrect in his statement.
That is what I'm saying, yes.
Okay, that's a very interesting response.
Okay.
Councilman Petrus?
On or around March 13th, an employee reported that she felt unsafe in the workplace. And this employee was allowed to work from a different location. And I learned that unfortunately, on or around March 27th, this employee, after reporting that she felt unsafe in the workplace, was put on administrative leave. This is deeply concerning to me because on its face, it appears that it may have been a retaliatory act. And so it would be helpful, Mr. President, if the mayor could address this and answer why this person was put on administrative leave.
So before I do, I would caution the councilman that maybe he should check with the law director about this line of questioning.
He suggests that I talk with you.
Okay, I imagine that he didn't suggest that you talk with me in this setting. However, I can say this, at no point was any employee retaliated against. That is unequivocal. That is a very direct statement in response to your question. And for the safety and security of everyone involved in this event, I guess, that you were referencing, I placed an employee on paid administrative leave with an extremely direct and considerate explanation of why. So I appreciate your concern. I do. But I would like you to know that at no point was any employee retaliated against by me throughout the course of my term, including in this circumstance. Now, I will say this, it was after consultation with outside counsel that we brought in order to produce an unbiased, separated, independent investigation into an allegation that I don't believe it's appropriate to get into until we have findings from that outside counsel that we can reference.
Continue, please.
Could you tell us the reason why this person was put on administrative leave?
I can tell you that it was for the safety and security of that employee, their feelings of security, and the feelings of security of anybody else in this office.
All right. Other, yes.
Yes, so
Councilman Cobb.
again, referring to the employee handbook, the stated policy of the city is to have an anti-harassment, anti-bullying policy. Workplace harassment is prohibited. Anything that could be construed as bullying is prohibited. Again, all of the allegations that have been made all would violate the city's HR manual. And I'm glad to hear that you've brought an outside law firm in to investigate this particular allegation. It seems to me that we need to have a broader investigation to determine if, in fact, there is any merit or truth to these allegations. And that needs to be done, I think, to assure the public that these allegations are either false or unfounded or they're true. But, you know, you as the chief executive can't be the ultimate arbiter of any HR that's, of any actions that are being taken.
Okay, so, Mr. President, first of all, I think that it might be a good idea to ask the law director, in his experience, have there ever been any complaints that were not seriously investigated and in an unbiased way and findings taken and acted upon? That in your recollection?
Not to my recollection. I mean, it's certainly the policy of the city and the HR department and the law department, and it's been supported, again, in my recollection by your office, that when complaints are received, and there may be complaints I'm not aware of, but that's not in my recollection, they are evaluated, followed up on as necessary, investigated sometimes by an independent investigator, and depending upon the outcome of that investigation, the actionable findings are pursued.
Thank you.
So just for clarity, are there any official complaints that have been filed with the city, with HR, or anything, or are we just discussing the emails? I guess is my question. I don't know who that's a question for, but is the email, because we're talking about the allegation, I just want to, just from a legal standpoint, I just want clarity on what that is.
I'm not sure if I know exactly what the question is, but to the extent that is the communication about this incident that Councilman Petrus referred to, considered a complaint. I think that it is considered a complaint. And I think that was the purpose of bringing in outside counsel to follow up on that. So I don't remember if it's titled complaint, et cetera,
Okay.
but it's being treated as a complaint that's being investigated.
Thank you.
Is it just the one?
That's what.
Is what just
I'm sorry, is the one about the woman that, I'm sorry, you didn't say any names, right?
I did not.
Okay, so the one that was filed on March 27th, I don't know, I don't know if I remember the date that you.
On or around the 13th.
Oh, on around the 13th. Is that the only HR complaint filed?
Well, so the words that you said, no, that's not the only HR complaint that's been filed, because there's no time frame there, et cetera. That's the only HR complaint that I'm aware of in the context of the subject of this meeting that has been received and that is the subject of the investigation.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman Posh.
Have there been complaints against the mayor's wife by city staff?
I'm not sure I'm a person who can answer that, but I'm not aware of other HR complaints about Mayor's wife. Again, this is like it's testimony. People are
I don't
asking me
mean
questions,
it to
so I'm gonna
be-
be very careful.
I know, but
It's a very serious subject, right?
It is.
And so this is the only HR complaint that I'm aware of.
yeah, I'm hopeful to hear an answer of no. That's what I'm hopeful to hear.
Well, I'd
State.
like to chime in as well and just state unequivocally again, this is the only HR complaint that I've ever been made aware of.
Okay, Councilwoman Larson?
I would like to know if, once the investigation is completed, if council will be privy and perhaps in an executive session to the results of that inquiry. I am very concerned about our employees coming to work and not feeling safe if that is the situation. And I'd like to be reassured that perhaps that's not the case.
I imagine that at some point when this investigation is complete, I will likely forego the need for executive session altogether, probably over the advice of the law director, and make those findings public myself.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Costa?
So what avenues are open to an employee to be able to file a complaint without putting their job in jeopardy? And without the fact that that particular employee has filed a complaint being disclosed to anyone in the city until the investigation is completed?
So as you know, Councilman, I'm not the head of HR. A lot of these questions really are human resource questions. That said, the city has policies that prohibit retaliation, that provide for the filing of complaints and the conducting of appropriate investigations.
I understand that, but it's a practical matter. If you're
And if you're asking that I
Your job
fold this
is at
into an
risk.
investigation or analysis by the law department and provide some feedback or some guidance about the existing current processes, I can do that as well.
and I guess my
I didn't
question
realize I was
is,
a star witness tonight.
my question is not really directed at you. It's, I guess,
I'm actually not a witness.
directed at the mayor. What is there open to an employee to file a complaint?
So, just in a basic way, it is the process that you would see in any municipal organization like ours and other organizations where an employee is always not only allowed to, but encouraged to provide complaints to human resources. Human resources as a primary repository of those types of complaints, and that's throughout an organization. And you find employees complaining or making complaints about their direct supervisors or about coworkers. In this case, it is currently slightly more interesting to everybody here. So your particular question about being able to file a complaint, which has been done and has been followed up on, and given the circumstances, followed up on in an unbiased way by bringing in outside counsel who's not beholden to anybody here at the city in the administration. However, in this circumstance, what would normally be a private HR complaint that would go through the typical process of investigation, findings, and then a recommendation and actions taken. I guess the interest here has not allowed that employee, I think, some of the privacy that normally an employee would be provided by this process. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the investigation. I think that, I don't want to bias this investigation. I don't want to influence this investigation. I don't believe that it is necessarily safe to say that this particular proceeding doesn't, run the risk of doing exactly that. And so I have some care and concern about that. I would like an unbiased investigation, untainted, providing findings of fact and a recommendation for action, untainted by this kind of process where a public excoriation ahead of any findings being created. And so I think in this case, because of the particular type of interest in these allegations, unfortunately, and through no doing of the administration exactly, this employee is not being given the privacy that an employee would generally expect and I would say deserve.
Councilman Petrus?
It's my understanding that numerous employees have submitted complaints about egregious workplace behavior at King Park, and that the city engaged Clemens Nelson to investigate that. I'm grateful to hear that you are interested in releasing the findings of this new investigation. Will you release the findings of the Clemens Nelson investigation?
So I don't have any actual role, direct role in that. My understanding is that this was an investigation undertaken by HR, law, and an outside counsel. And I believe the law director may have more context to that. I know that there have been public records requests for documentation. I don't know what documentation is public record and what isn't, but the law director can provide information about that to you as well. I'm not exactly sure what the relevance is to the specific set of allegations that we're talking about here.
The relevance is that there were numerous complaints about a hostile work environment at Kane Park. And so is it possible for the report to be publicly released?
The portions of the report that would not be attorney work product, I think the documentation of discipline flowing from the investigation would be public.
Okay. Is that something that you would
My
like?
belief is that that process is underway with regard to the public records requests.
Do you want us to submit a records request, or is that something that could just be furnished?
I think that it's already been submitted. I'll follow
What's
up
been
on-
submitted?
I'm sorry.
Sure.
There are many different anonymous email addresses submitting public records requests at this point. Some of them may be associated with people who might be in this room, but others may not. And so just providing public records to one of those anonymous requesters may or may not provide any
Agreed.
information to the council members.
So when we're done evaluating, I'm sorry, and you're right. My point about that was that when the process of sorting that out with respect to the requests that have been received is completed, then those portions can be provided to council.
Okay. Should we email you, or will you send it out to all of us?
I'll remember to do it. Yeah.
I would take it, Mayor, that you get the findings when they're done.
Again, I'm not the law department. The law department is in charge of responding to public records requests for a reason. That reason is to ensure that certain things that are not allowed to be produced are not produced, and that the things that are mandated to be produced are produced, and I don't make those determinations.
I will commit to following up on that specific request, ascertaining where it stands, and making sure that that gets resolved and council receives whatever is sent out to the request.
Go ahead, Councilman Bosch.
So along the same lines, you know, I'm trying to get a handle on, is this a problem? Is it, you know, if there is, what's the severity of it? I'd like to ask my peers. You know, people contact us sometimes out of the blue. I mean, we live in the city. There's people that work at City Hall that live in the city. There's a lot of chatter we hear. Recognizably, some of the information we hear may not be accurate, but some of it may be. I have heard from multiple current and former employees that feel like they've been harassed here. Do we hear the same? Do my peers hear the same thing? I mean, everybody says, no, I'm gonna walk away from this, but
Yes.
I've heard some disturbing directly to me from former employees, very disturbing about goings on here. But
Yes. And while I'm here, I'm going to take off my council hat, if I may.
I don't know
And
that
put
that's possible.
and put on my labor hat. I've been contacted by quite a few employees and former employees, as well as directors. And maybe because they know I come from labor, who knows? Just as a general in labor, people are not going to identify themselves because of the fear of retaliation. Even when people have called or text or sent me emails, they definitely request that I do not mention their name or talk about them, period. But they have expressed much concern of how their employment is going on, what their employment is going on here and at Kane Park. Generally, human resources is here to protect the company, not an employee. Human resources is here to make sure when an employee goes to talk to them, that they get the information they need to be able to either get rid of that employee in some way, shape, or form, or to discredit what that person is saying. Also, that also happens sometimes with an independent contractor who is serving as a human resource department. So when we ask, have there been any allegations or anything written up for human resources, people are not going to identify themselves. People, from what I understand, true, false, or indifferent, I'm only reporting what I have been reported to, is that people are terrified, uncomfortable, and do not want to be identified. And my response to them has been, it's very difficult to try to help you in a situation when I can't identify you and the problem or the situation. Only thing I can do is try to investigate those problems or situations. So some of the things that are being said, as far as Mr. Horgan's email, I spoke with him. I believe his email to be true based on what I'm hearing from other staff people who work here. Just 2 days ago, I received an email, or not an email, a message asking for help. And I have told people what to do and what they need to do to try to cover themselves in the situation that's going on here. Because the EEOC is a place where people who are feeling threatened, bullied, or discriminated against should go to make an official complaint if they are afraid to go to their employer. So I'm concerned as being a labor leader, as a worker myself who has worked under conditions where, for example, an employer supervisor used to have a bat in the corner when employees would come in to threaten them as to say, you're either gonna do this or what else. And I've written about that in my book of how people have been discriminated against in a workplace. And it really disturbs me highly because it's very difficult for people to work and feel afraid because they don't know where their next check is coming from. And they don't know how they're going to take care of their families. And when you're bullied at work, it is not very comfortable. It actually calls for a workplace of insecurities and whispers, and nothing is secret. I don't care what people say, nothing is secret. So as a general statement, I'm just saying that I find that a lot of times HR is to protect the organization, not necessarily the employee.
Oh, go ahead, Councilman.
Well, I do have-
Just so, you know, I mean, I'd like to put a limit on, not on anybody's, but just maybe like, let's try to get to 7:30. I mean, 8 o'clock at the absolute latest, if that's okay with everybody.
I kind of have a follow-up question to my initial question, but did everybody want a response? knows of any issues?
Need anybody else? I
Yeah, I mean-
said yes.
I know you said yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Councilmember Cobb used the word investigation. I mean, maybe I wouldn't use the word investigation, but I would use the word, help us get some advice here. I do think the law director is, with all due respect, conflicted in this issue. I mean, you work for the mayor and, the mayor signs your paycheck. And I respect that. I also need to say,
a process that has an integrity from the inside and the outside, I think it's important to keep those things in mind, so.
well, I also need to say, I'm a huge admirer of your work on top of all this. I don't question that at all. But I almost feel that we need to get some outside expertise that can come in and advise us. Investigation is probably too strong of a word, but I think these events, and this is a big deal. Okay, we're being laughed at by our residents. I see people nodding their head here. We're being laughed at, and I think we need to get some serious advice to deal with a serious issue here. I don't want to go as far as saying that there's a problem. It might, the smell test gives me the impression that we got a problem here. But I think we need to get some good advice to deal with this serious matter. And I'm hopeful that we can engage a party that can help council figure that out.
So engage a party, or let me ask the law director this question, and I'll call on you. So we could feasibly, if an ex-employee wanted to come in and talk to us, I'm asking you this. If they wanted to talk to us in executive session, even though they're not an employee anymore, would that fall under a personnel issue for an executive session?
I'm not certain that it does,
Okay.
President, but let me hold that into the things that I follow up with you about.
Because, Councilman Posh, I'm just trying to figure out if what you want is counsel, if you're talking about counsel investigating, I would suppose that in an executive session, maybe, and I don't know this, but maybe somebody would be more comfortable talking to us plainly with nobody else in the room about a personnel matter. Go ahead, Councilman Maddox.
No, I just want to make sure that, just for the public, that we understand we have one complaint and we have hearsay from several council members at this table. And so it's important for me that we make it clear to this public that right now there is no fire. There is a complaint that's being investigated already. My training in HR background, absolutely, I believe that any complaint is absolutely important. I just want to make sure that it's clear that we are separating what people have heard privately from what is actually considered a complaint from an HR standpoint. I think there's an opportunity for someone who is speaking out to do that. I think they absolutely should. It needs to be put on record. But I want to make sure that we're very careful that we start spending money or doing a winch hunt just based on somebody's side conversation. So I'd like to make sure that any information that we gathered was done. That's the third time. Please stop.
I'm breathing.
You can do quieter then, because
Okay.
you're only doing it like that when
Councilman,
I'm
let's
talking. Thank
just
you.
focus
Stop,
on
please. Thank you.
this here.
So I think just making sure that we've got the information that we need, and the information is actually open and honest, whether they're giving it to a third party or not, I think it's important. But I'd like to see what these other complaints at least are, to make sure that there's actually people behind them, if that makes sense.
Sure.
This is not one person. You're forgetting about Dan Horrigan's message and his complaint, which is the basis. First of all, he was for his limited term here, I thought he was going to be a white knight and help save us and bring some really good best practices and do the work of a city administrator that is really necessary to keep this city functional and running. His comments, even though the mayor says that they're in error and they're not accurate, are, you just don't leave after 2 months, 2.5 months, without notice. You just don't leave. And, you know, he was very generous in not even bring these up when he left. I mean, this was uncovered through public information requests. So there's more than just the one. So
Mr. President,
Yeah, go ahead.
this, it's sort of for all of our edification. At no point until a day prior to Mr. Horrigan's resignation did I get any indication from Mr. Horrigan about the workplace being hostile. This was at no point discussed with me. So I agree with you that it is very unusual that someone with Mr. Horrigan's resume, I suppose, would operate in that manner. It is very unusual. I think that, again, the council and perhaps some of our residents and perhaps others are jumping to conclusions in ways that I am not afforded the luxury. For my purposes as the mayor, it is incumbent on me to allow a process of investigation, unbiased fact-finding, and a report to take place in order to take action. I understand that the council is not constrained by those particular ethics and responsibilities. Council has a different role, and each council member independently elected has their own role to play too. I see council doing that now. But again, I would like to encourage the council to recognize that this is a government organization, an employer of over 400 people, between say 430 and 500 people at any given time during the year. And we have processes that have worked, that continue to work. I understand the anecdotal, I don't know that I could use the word hearsay except colloquially here, but sort of anonymized sources of discontent or complaint is not something that a government can rely on to take action. The claims that there's a fear of retaliation, one might expect that you would see evidence of retaliation. I don't imagine that this law director, whether he works for me or not, due to his ethical constraints and his actual livelihood, which goes beyond the city of Cleveland Heights or my employ, his ethical considerations would not allow him to simply look the other way while the allegations that have been made go on. That simply would not happen. I think, or perhaps I shouldn't. Perhaps I shouldn't think that this council is familiar enough with the law director and his actual employer in a certain respect, at the law firm Retzel, would recognize that in a very real way, the law director is more governed by his ethical considerations than by some fear of no longer having Cleveland Heights as a client. So I want to point that out. I think that it's important for all of you to have a recognition of the actual situation that we're in and the reality of it. I understand that some of you have claimed that there are some undetermined number of employees or former employees who have spoken with you. I cannot judge the veracity of those claims based on the information you've provided. But I think that it's important not to, for one, call into question the law director's ethics, because I don't think that you have any reason to do that, not any rational basis to call into question the law director's ethics, which by extension, if you say that there is this pervasive hostile work environment, then clearly the law director is aware and looking the other way. And I would caution against making that implication. For one, I recognize that, you know, certainly in an odd year, people are going to make all types of claims about me. And as an elected official and a public persona for that reason, I don't even have the benefit of a defamation claim to make. That's politics in Cleveland Heights right now. However, the law director has particular responsibilities. And if you say that you have respect for his work, I imagine that you wouldn't also imply that there would be a pervasive hostile work environment operating underneath his nose or with his awareness, and nothing would be done about it.
All right, go ahead, Councilman.
No, I never.
I think I know this answer.
Yeah, I never made that accusation at all. I mean, the core issue that you questioned initially before you went on and on and on and on was the issue of Dan Horgan never, you know, bringing this up to you prior. There were multiple emails that were going back and forth between the two of you regarding this issue.
I'm sorry, can you specify what emails you're talking about?
I have one right here. There's other emails that have been shared with us in public and from residents with other public information requests. But the issue here is there is a very high, if he was complaining about an HR director, he would easily be able to go into your office and have that complaint. It's a much higher standard for him to have to go into your office and ask you to have your wife not work in this place of business, acting as an employee and working like an employee and directing employees. That's a much, much higher standard.
Again, categorically denied. My wife knows that she is not the mayor. Repeatedly insisted that her opinions are her own.
I hope that's the case.
It's also been the
So-
case that I've expressed that.
I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Now, what I'm saying to my peers is, what do we do about this? Can we bring somebody in? Are we in agreement with that?
When you say somebody, you mean an outside person?
An outside person, maybe an investigator, someone to give us some advice regarding this issue. I would say probably an HR
I'm gonna
specialist.
call on Cobb first. I'm really not prepared to answer that.
There's a cloud over the city. There are allegations that have been made by Oregon, and you denied the allegations. This needs to get resolved by an independent fact finder, one way or another. We just can't let this situation linger on, nor can that investigation be limited to the specifics of the one employee on administrative leave. There is an allegation that there is a pervasive hostile work environment existing in City Hall. I would think that you would want that resolved.
So in response to that, for one, it is incumbent on me to ensure a safe, hospitable workplace for my employees. I have a specific complaint that is currently being investigated. I know that council wants to, generally has a need sometimes to take the wheel. I get that. What you're discussing is not something that I haven't already envisioned. And so I do want to let you know, like right now I'm addressing a particular complaint. I cannot and should not, I think, respond with the allocation of funds to every internet rumor or every vague allegation made about a pervasive hostile work environment. But I think that it is important to address this particular issue, get some insight from it, and then move on from there. That is an administrative function. I understand that council wants to exercise its oversight authority or privilege, but this is more a supervision than oversight question.
Go ahead. And then, I'm sorry.
It goes beyond supervision.
I don't know that that's true, but I suppose you can.
You're the chief executive
One at a time.
officer of essentially a municipal corporation. There have been allegations that have been made against you.
What specific allegations are
The
you?
allegations that you are permitting your wife to create a hostile work environment in City Hall that have gone just beyond the one employee.
Sir, you were corporate counsel for a corporation, yes?
And we would bring in a third party to investigate a situation involving a complaint against the CEO.
Yes, right. Of course.
But we wouldn't limit it to the allegations that have been made go beyond this one employee.
I think in response to that, it is very, very difficult for maybe me to convey the difference between I wouldn't call that a specific allegation, because I think you know that a hostile work environment is a specific legal term creating a specific, denoting a particular definition. I think that you know well enough to know that this does not constitute even close to something that would be addressed in that way. Now, I understand that right now there is a frenzy. You know, I get it. And again, we are in an odd year. I understand. However,
Point of order. Would you please instruct Angela Fasola to stop this? And I've sat here through this
I don't know
entire
what
meeting.
this is.
She's continued to speak, snicker, and say things under her breath right behind me, and it has to stop. She does it most meetings, but this has to stop. Everyone else is being completely silent, but she's being extremely disruptive.
Okay,
So either she needs to be just as silent as everyone else, or she needs to leave, because this is disrespectful.
I didn't
It is
hear it.
constant.
Councilman, I hear you, but I didn't hear it. But if I do hear it, I absolutely do.
I am
I'm
trying
sorry, where are we?
I am trying to tune it out as I
It is
respond.
constant. So if you're waiting to hear it before you address it, we have a problem, because I'm way down here with her right behind me.
Maybe you're because you're closer. I will.
Yeah, why don't you come on this side of the room?
I will.
We'll switch.
We'll switch.
Where I am and
Okay,
I'm a grown up.
that helps. Go ahead, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So again, you're asking for an investigation into an accusation that reveals no specifics. I'm being told that there are some number, and I think that email and that the councilman referenced says a number of employees. Can you confirm that for me?
Caused a number of employees.
A number of employees. Again, this is not actionable. However, it is my intention to have a better understanding of the feelings of my employees, not just about this specific allegation, but in general. And I would ask that the council recognize that there is a particular set of administrative processes that addresses these things, and the first thing to look at is a specific complaint. The information revealed from that complaint investigation, I believe, will be instructive about our next steps.
Let me. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just and clarify. You are correct. I have been imprecise in using the term. I think all of us have hostile work environment, which connotates a protected class. There was no allegations being made that a protected class has been the victim of a hostile workplace. The city's policy is much broader than that, and it prohibits a hostile work environment that is unrelated to race, sex, class, age. So when I'm using that term, that's exactly what I mean. And we have an anti-bullying. But the essence is that an employee needs to feel safe and comfortable when they come to work. And the allegations that are being made by some employees, and that's all they are allegations. Let's make that clear. That's all they are, allegations. Suggest that there is something that is not, the allegations are that there's something that's not right here in City Hall.
We do not tolerate bullying. We do not tolerate discrimination. When these things are brought to our attention, we address them. There has, to my recollection, not been a claim of retaliation that someone could point to as evidence that there is a reasonable fear of retaliation for speaking up.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, though. A lot of people don't want to speak up. But go ahead.
And just to be clear, and just to be very, very clear, I've stated it once, I'm gonna state it again. You may have one individual that has identified themselves to being harassed or bullied or whatever it may be. And I don't have to sit here and lie or make up anything based on any year of what people have been telling me by name. But I am not going to disclose their name because they do not want to feel bullied or harassed or any retaliation. And I don't care where anyone comes from, or what organization they come from. If you have ever been in a workplace, everyone knows this exists. It exists in every workplace, some way, some shape, form, or fashion, where there are particular areas of employment where people are bullied, where people are abused and not respected. And there are many places and many organizations in the HR department, from the CEO all the way down, is we do not tolerate that. But it happens quite often, quite regularly. And I am not going to put anyone on blast to make them feel even more uncomfortable about coming into a workplace. So to get to the bottom of a lot of this, yes, maybe there's one specific person, but generally there are more. So we have to deal with the general, assuming that there's more than one person, and find out who is willing to speak up or speak out, or can be a agreement written to every employee. You can speak up and speak out. No retaliation will be given to you. No discipline will be given to you. No demotion will be given to you. No removal of your whatever be given to you. And then maybe people will come forward because they will have a written agreement with the city and themselves to feel comfortable to do so. But until people feel comfortable to be able to really say what's going on, they're not going to do that. And I can't blame them. People have lives, people have families, people have all of these things in front of them. But I also have a question. There's another email that came out, and I don't have it in front of me, but I don't know if you have it, Mr. Posh, Councilman Posh, where Dan Horgan mentions that it was an incident that happened the day before that he alludes to that you were aware of, and that's why he was working from home. And I was just wondering, could you give any explanation to that?
Not at this time. As I said, before we get there, I'd like to, we have right now a firm, outside counsel, doing an investigation into a particular complaint by an employee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm anticipating that this investigation will be done relatively soon, and we will have findings produced that will give insight into that situation. I would like to ask the law director to weigh in on your idea about agreements with employees about retaliation.
I'd have to give some thought to how that might play out. I would say, though, that struggling to know how that would give an employee more confidence that there would be no retaliation than the fact that retaliation is prohibited by Ohio law and federal law. And even if a complaint is ultimately determined to be incorrect or off base to some extent, essentially as long as it's not maliciously and purposely false, no retaliation is legally permitted.
Correct.
And so that is the current state of the law in Ohio, in Cleveland Heights, under Cleveland Heights' ordinances and policies, as well as, again, the state law and the federal law. So if somebody complains of hostile work environment, even if they are wrong, they, again, unless they meet a very difficult standard of poor behavior on their part in bringing that complaint, they have, in doing that, in making that complaint, engaged in what's called protected activity. And an adverse employment action that is the result of engaging in protected activity, again, is unlawful retaliation and exposes the city and the officials involved to significant liability.
You are absolutely correct. But retaliation does happen, regardless of what the law says. In general workplaces, retaliation does happen. It's very easy for someone to come to work every day and find something that they're doing in their job that they shouldn't be doing, because everybody's human. Everybody does not work a perfect day every day. It is very easy to find fault with employees to be able to fire them or get them out the way and say it's not retaliation. So I agree with what the law says, but I am talking about experience. I am talking about what I fight for every day, what I've been fighting for over 30-something years as far as employment and people's rights. So I understand the law very well when it comes to employment, but I do understand exactly what happens in a workplace environment where there's hostility, there's bullying, and people are trying to do their job and people are retaliating against them. So I do understand all of those things that everyone's just saying. I'm just saying in general, what we say at this table don't necessarily have to happen, don't necessarily happen. So I don't want anybody to be fooled at all when it comes to workplace issues at all. I am very passionate about that. And I agree that there is a law. There are laws about that. But I just want people just not to say things don't happen
Go ahead, Mr.
in
Moran.
organizations.
So, I just wanted to say, it's certainly true that the cases in which a supervisor or an employer says, I'm firing you because you filed an EEOC charge are
They can't do
very,
that.
very.
They're not gonna do that if they file an EEOC,
And
that's for
so
sure.
the analysis of whether unlawful retaliation has occurred is much more nuanced, much more difficult. It can involve things like looking at, are you holding somebody to a different standard than other employees? Are you holding somebody to a different standard than you did before the complaint?
Correct.
Are you bird dogging them, so to speak, by following to make sure what they do all day, every day and seeing if there are mistakes? Those things all come into play. But
Under the EEOC, yes.
But I mean, the law in general looks at, if these things are taking place, these are some of the ways in which we evaluate whether a motive to terminate somebody or demote somebody or cut their pay, whatever the adverse employment action is, involves unlawful retaliation. But the concern that I would have with the contract is multifaceted. I don't know how it would be enforceable. I don't know who
No,
would
I
sign
understand. I
it.
just brought that up
It would
as a
put
way
the
to
city
say-
in the same position that
He's trying to
as it
put it
is
in context.
currently in terms of potential liability for unlawful retaliation. It may be, and as this process moves forward, law department can discuss and talk with HR about, potentially some communications to make sure employees are educated about their rights in those areas if these concerns are so widespread.
Right.
Because it's never a bad thing to be reminded of your rights.
Right, and I have done that, as I said, but I know in the workplace, when you file an EEOC complaint, the employer dare to mess with you. But if you don't file an EEO complaint and you try to complain to Human Resources works for the organization. A private entity works for the organization. That does not cover an employee from actual, almost stop.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But I still want
I'm
to answer
actually-
to the question.
I'm actually dying to ask a question myself, but
The question with Mr. Horgan's email, and
Well, we'll have to find that email.
bring the email up, and he spoke of the incident that happened. it appeared that the mayor was aware of it, and he chose to work from home the following day.
Well, let's find that email and we'll talk about it. Go ahead, and then I'd like to go next. if that's
Okay, so, I mean, we've talked about a lot of important things. We've learned thus far that the mayor has stated that Dan Horgan's representation in his email and his communication is incorrect. It is so damning, though, coming from Dan's mouth, that I feel that we need to hire an employment law firm to help us get to the truth. And to be honest with you, Mayor, I hope that we'll find out that it is indeed exactly as you paint this to be untrue, because that's going to be what's best for the city and best for you. But we need to know for sure. I mean, we can talk, we can point fingers, we can talk about this forever, but this is really, really serious information. I mean, job losing kind of information from your perspective, Mayor.
Well, Councilman, I'll tell you what, I think we do need to think about this. I want to ask my question. So Mayor, I want to go back to one thing you said about Mr. Horgan. You said that you had no complaints from him up until that point, where all of a sudden he said, I'm resigning. That was a bit of a surprise. Am I characterizing it correctly?
I'm curious, is this curiosity, is this sort of?
No, but I have a question. I have a question coming, but I just want to make sure I have this right. Because if that was the first time you heard anything from him about dissatisfaction on the job, was his resignation. Here's I want to set up a scenario, and then I want to ask you a question. I was in this room at that end of the table. Mr. Horgan was on one side, I was on the other, and the two of us were talking at his request. I asked him about two operational things that I assume as the city administrator he was overseeing. One was the exterior home repair program and how it could be rolled out. And then the other was about fixing elevators in the length of time it's taken to fix the elevators in the two parking garages. 4 minutes into our conversation, you burst into the room. And I'm gonna get to the question in a moment. And you were clearly upset that we were talking. You said, what's going on here? And we were both like deer in the headlights. This is my view. We were like, what's going on, okay? And you sat down right where you're sitting now, and you said, I wanna know why you sent out an email with red flags in it, and what did that have to do with the budget? And I actually explained to you in that moment what it had to do with budget, although I had no intention of answering any questions in the moment. This is an easy question. I said, the red flags were about December 19th. And there were so many things that I didn't like about that meeting that I wanted to make it clear to you that we were talking about the budget and you were calling council names. And as soon as I finished that, I said, could Mr. Horgan and I continue our conversation? And you said, yeah, go ahead. And I said, no, not with you in the room. And you said, I'm not leaving. And I said, well, I am. And I walked out the door. That's what happened. Here's my question. And I want to say just one more thing. On 2 occasions after that happened, Mr. Horgan said to me, this is so embarrassing. I am so sorry. I don't know why he said it the second time, because I said, look, you didn't do anything. That's what I said to him. And then maybe a month later, this happened in January, maybe a month later, he said, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. What I want to know is, did he ever say that to you?
Okay, so you and I have slightly different recollections of that interaction.
Can we get to the part about whether he ever mentioned that to you?
Do you have a problem with the way that I'm responding?
Well, I just want to know, because this gets to the heart of the matter, I think. Because if he didn't say, no, go ahead.
I'll say this. For one, Mr. Horgan apologized to me for not informing me about this interbranch strategy session. I think that how he characterized the meeting to me was that the council president wanted to talk with him about some things. And I don't believe that he had an understanding of what those things might be.
Are you talking about before or after the meeting? Because, I mean, it was very clear. We talked about two topics in
I'm
about
sorry,
4 minutes.
obviously I wasn't included in the meeting.
Understood.
And you and I have had a long conversation about my desire to be in the loop, about my desire to have some understanding of the policy positions that my administration is engaging in. I don't know exactly how it makes any sense for the elected mayor of a city to be out of the loop on major initiatives, like a home repair program that actually Mr. Horrigan was not overseeing. But I'll say this, I think that one of the things that we've discussed over quite a while, in the same way that we had a conversation about how, and I apologized and told you that I meant no disrespect just today at the finance committee, when I, had requested to work with the finance chair and the administrative services chair on internal administrative financial reporting and budgeting processes so that I could make sure that council's perspective was included in our process building. And you very, very clearly and aggressively told me that it was very disrespectful of me to try to go behind your back to talk to your council members. Please.
A little different than that, but go ahead.
Now my expectation, based on our constant conversation around this, was that you understood that the elected head of the government should be included in whatever conversations that I need to be included in when it comes to the administration's direction. And that was really my concern in that moment, is that there was a situation that was going on where I had a city administrator who was very, very new, who had been very accessible to all of council even before he was confirmed, but without any type of heads up to me or a notification in advance that my administration would be working with you on something or developing some sort of plan after we had discussed ad nauseum the concept, and my understanding is that you agreed to this, that I would be in the loop. And so my concern and why I came to that meeting, I was asking you, hey, you need to give me a heads up just so I'm in the loop. We've talked about this for 3 years. Now, I understand that in this moment, you would like to cast me in a particular light. I understand that.
You're not getting it.
Maybe I'm not getting it, but
Can I clarify this?
I don't
Because
know.
you're going into a place that I'm not going.
no, I need to stop you for just a second
No.
and continue in this line. I mean, we could call for the orders of the day. What I don't understand is, other than sort of additional grandiose color, that interaction between you and I is related to this in what way?
I'll tell you exactly what way, and you didn't really answer my question.
I told you that Mr. Horgan apologized to
Okay.
me for not informing me early enough
So there-
about interaction between branches.
So I need
As we had already discussed.
Thank you, Mayor. I need the floor for a moment. Number one, with Danny Williams and with Dan Horrigan, there were many times when we spoke when you weren't involved. That seemed to be an exception to the general rule of, directors and so forth. So that's number one. Number two, the point I was making, and I find this interesting, and I understand what your concern is, but I think it's interesting and perhaps instructive that he said something different to you than he said to me. His viewpoint to me was, this is an embarrassment. That was his viewpoint to me. His viewpoint to you was, I'm so sorry I didn't inform you of this meeting before. Here's my point. This is what we've been kind of alluding to in many of these conversations so far. People don't want to say things that upset the administrator. You know, they don't really want to say, you know, this really sucked, Mayor, and I'm really upset with you, the way you came in the room, the way you interrupt, whatever, you know. But I will tell you, his point of view to me was apologetic, embarrassment, and, you know, this is what I'm worried. I think this is what we're all worried about is that people don't really want to come forward and say what's happening because, you know, it's just too uncomfortable. I mean, it's not the only conclusion you could come to, but it's the one that I would come to based on what you just said. Go ahead, Council.
Just describing the culture and what you're saying, you know, that's part of the reason I felt uncomfortable with how the initial investigation in terms of council went along. Part of that information that I received was that a member of council leadership instructed a staff member to delete the emails from your private
Councilman,
meeting.
that is not on the agenda.
So I'm
mean,
stating this. These are things and feedback that we've gotten from staff members and from outside sources. I don't think it's a culture coming from the mayor. I think that there are people who are giving feedback and are fearful to talk to many people in this city in terms of leadership. And again, that's just one example of a complaint that I received that's being reviewed from council leadership towards its own staff member in the city of Cleveland Heights. One of them. So I don't know. All I'm stating is, if we're going to state facts, let's get clarity about the fact that if we're talking this way, then maybe there is a culture that we need to take a look at in terms of everyone instead of pointing this finger. I think we need to step back because there are multiple people at this table who've received complaints from staff members at City Hall over the last 4 years. I've been bringing them up for the past 4 years, even when we got sworn in, with people bombarding into people's offices and making demands. These things have all been documented. And so I think we need to have a broader discussion then about how we handle staff as a whole then in the city.
Well, if it were on the agenda, I do want to
That didn't
move.
feel like a hostile environment?
Hold on a second.
I just,
Okay, to conduct an
Just didn't want
investigation,
to
I'm
do
pleased.
that.
We could, maybe the law director can
she's only.
opine about sort of the efficacy, first of all.
Mayor, I didn't
also
recognize
the
you.
ramification, no, this is a point of order, I'm sorry.
Oh, I
The
didn't know that.
ramifications of making that kind of inquiry to a staff member in this setting, that is extremely A, unusual, and B, inappropriate, and I think that the councilwoman knows that. Putting somebody on the spot in a public meeting on camera, asking them if they have experienced hostility of any kind is completely inappropriate, and I just needed to make a point of order and potentially ask the law director to opine about what that could do.
And that was concerning a statement of another council member stating that one of our employees feels like she's in a hostile environment, and we only have one employee, so she was sitting here smiling, so.
Well,
So-
Councilman Maddox said that's not what he was saying. Did you want to say something?
I would only say that I think the mayor's correct that there's not an investigation that's occurring
No,
or
it's not.
unfolding
It's
during this
just something
meeting.
to say.
And that would be
I was
a
being
conversation that would happen better in a different forum, so I would suggest
I
moving
do
on
think
to
she
your
was
next
kidding, but
agenda.
I understand why it maybe didn't land.
Thank you. The author of the Cleveland Scene piece, after his interview with the mayor, posted a comment online, and it says, quote, "The bulk of the mayor's response when we talked about McDaniel was that, as he pointed to a lot, she is his first lady, and that apparently, in Saren's mind, gives her the ability to sit in on hirings and firings and give directives to employees, which seem to have gotten out of hand." So the mayor
so
has
no, no,
said,
no.
I'm sorry, I haven't asked my
Yeah.
question here.
Please don't, wait till you're, go ahead.
Told us that there have been no directives, but have any non-employees sat in on hirings or firings?
Actually, multiple non-employees have sat in on hirings. No non-employees have sat in on firings.
Could you tell us?
And actually, hirings is not really an appropriate way to think about that.
Interviews.
There have been interviews where multiple non-employees have sat in as consultants, not paid, volunteer consultants, with perspectives that I find valuable. So and I'm not exactly sure where you find inappropriateness in somebody sitting in on an interview of a potential candidate to provide insight that I find valuable about somebody joining my team. Now, I do think that it would be inappropriate for me to bring in, without reason, somebody who is not with the organization to issue a termination notice. And that has not happened. Additionally, as I've stated very directly, no directives from my wife were given. And that's, I think I've been clear. Obviously, whatever it is you're reading is not my assertion, and certainly not what I told the reporter from C. I appreciate, the try, but I'm sorry, that doesn't land.
So she has sat in on interviews?
I mean, I'd have to think about the conversations that I've had with certain candidates for certain positions.
It's kind of a yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, it's a yes or no, but I'm wondering, since I've already stated that yes, she has sat in on some conversations that I've had with a variety of people, whether it's people who have applied for a position or people who are seeking to do work with the city, when I find it valuable to get her insight. And additionally, other people who do not work for the city sitting in because I value their insight into a candidate that I'm seeking to bring on to be a part of the team. It feels combative, and so maybe I'm treating it like it's combative. This was a question that you were asking for what purpose exactly?
Well, my own view is that it seems unusual that non-employees would be involved in any sort of personnel matters. And I think that that's the view that a lot of people who have reached out to me have shared. And so after seeing that comment from the author of that piece, I was curious to hear you earlier share that there were no directives given. And regarding the other piece of that comment, I wanted to see if you happen to have a comment on that.
I do. Another comment on that. In fact, I sought the counsel of another person who was not an employee when hiring our finance director. And that non-employee sat in on the interview, and I took their perspective into account when making my decision on whether or not to bring Director Hairston on. That non-employee happens to be Dan Horrigan. I understand that for some reason, there's an implication that getting insight from people that I respect, whose perspective and opinions I trust, somehow equates to some decision-making being made that is not centralized in the chief elected official of the city. When it comes to our employment decisions, when it comes to who I'm bringing on to aid the city in its revitalization, I take a lot of input. Some from non-employees, some from employees, and I take all of those perspectives into account when I make my decisions. In fact, some people who aren't my employees who are in this room, I might ask for their impressions of people. And to that end, I think that we are actually better served by a diverse array of opinions from people that the mayor trusts in order to come to a well-reasoned decision.
I think that makes sense. Go ahead. Councilman Cobb, did you have your hand up?
No, I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Max.
No, I was just stating this is completely separate from HR, is that it's not unusual to have people who are not part of an organization in on those interviews. I was on one 2 days ago for a state position for someone. It's something that I do occasionally. It's part of my roles across the country between churches and nonprofits. So bringing in people with certain expertise as you're interviewing people, I think is extremely helpful. It helps shed light, especially if they've touched that kind of role before. So I don't think that's the same issue as everything else we're kind of discussing here. That's something that is typically done across organizations across this country, especially if you're interviewing people who have executive level roles. You'll tend to bring in people who have those voices and those advisors. And so I just wanted to add that.
All right, thank you, Councilman. We have 3 more items.
Can I just clarify this email?
Can you do what?
I want to clarify, I misspoke, and I just wanted to make sure that I
Oh, go ahead.
clarify. Yes, I misspoke, Mayor. The email did not speak of an incident. The email said, Mayor, based on the earlier conversation and not having clarity about the earlier email, I will be working remotely from home tomorrow. And she will let the proper staff know. So it wasn't an incident. It was that you did not clarify or say anything regarding his email, so he decided to work from home. Dan Horgan. I just wanted to clarify that. This just gone now, but you should have it, and it's public record. You should
All
have
right,
it.
so charter review work related to the above items. I think we should, I'm okay with talking about this for a few minutes, but we're gonna be soon, right, next week maybe? We'll see.
gotta respond to my people both,
Yeah, but are there anything specific that you want to say related to this situation? I know that, for instance, we've discussed subpoena power in the charter review inquiry, some of the law director language. I don't know, is there anything, anybody else? We could talk about this now, but if there's something anybody wants to bring forward that we haven't talked about, that you want to just say in this setting because it's relevant to this particular situation, I'm all ears. All right, then we'll move on, and then please, like I said, or I'm looking at Megan, Addie, just for Addie's sake and all of our sakes, please respond. All right, the Burgess and Burgess contract. Anybody want to go first?
Is there any results
I
from
don't know
that?
about that. Well, so is that your question?
Yes.
When are we going to get results from the Burgess and Burgess contract?
So this is an odd collection on your agenda of, unsupported, frankly, allegations and internet rumors. I am curious about what results exactly you are expecting to receive from the contract.
Oh, you want to clarify the results you want to see?
Well, is this the Burgess and Burgess contract for $48,000 for a survey?
I don't know what you're looking at, Councilman.
I'm looking at the agenda.
I didn't make the agenda. It was made very clear
Is
to
there a
me.
Burgess and Burgess contract, I guess? Law director, is there a Burgess and Burgess contract?
We have contracted with Burgess and Burgess, yeah.
Okay, so law director, what is the Burgess and Burgess contract?
So respectfully, I didn't make this agenda either.
No, so Burgess and Burgess has a contract.
What is the?
What is the content of the contract? Not the all of
What's
it.
the title?
Maybe just
I'm just
as a
trying to
point of
help.
inquiry,
Yeah.
You put it on
who
the agenda.
did make the agenda and what was the actual subject intended to be, so that we can sort of hone in on that particular
Yeah.
subject.
I second that.
I'm sorry, I put it on the agenda and I had a couple of questions. I don't know if anybody else had any questions, but I can read mine.
Mr. President, did
Yeah.
you circulate the document that you're speaking of or anything along those lines?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't circulate anything. I just wanted to know, is it an employee-only survey? And if and when could council see the results? And when I say results, I mean the responses to the survey.
Okay, so
And if somebody wants to ask another question, go ahead. But
I can say, there's been no survey. We've discussed this before. The city isn't doing a survey.
Okay. So what is the contract for?
The contract is for consulting services as a public entity for public business related in part and primarily to the operation of the communications function of our Department of Community Services, internally, externally, and how this process is working under a new mayoral form of government.
So specific to the communications department,
Community services.
community services, sorry, I know that's, and nothing else.
I think I just explained to the best of my ability in a very succinct way what the contract is for.
Okay.
However, I think all of you have probably been given at least some version of a contract that was requested by a wide variety of anonymous public requests.
I have a version.
Okay, so if you'd like, you can read the contract and see the
I'm
scope.
gonna read it, but
But I will say this, and I would like to point something out. I know that this question about a text message, I asked the councilwoman for the text message that she received saying something about a survey that you would click a link and go to a survey, and in an email to a resident, you expressed that you believe that the city of Cleveland Heights sent that survey link.
I believe they
In
did
order-
the survey.
I don't know why you believe that, but I will say that the city of Cleveland Heights is not, and I think I've stated this relatively clearly before, is not, and I don't believe should, do the kind of resident satisfaction survey that council members have been discussing at this time. I will say this though, in the middle of last year, maybe May or June, I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
Go ahead.
In the middle of last year, maybe May or June, I reached out to Burgess & Burgess to engage their services in order to improve our communications, improve our understanding of how best to communicate internally primarily, but also externally with the public, and to see how this was operating in this new form of government. We received a proposal, which I believe is likely something that the council members have as a result of the various anonymous public requests. And that proposal, I believe in the middle of last year, included a variety of services that we could potentially take advantage of. Now, given the length of time and the other priorities that the administration had, we didn't actually enter into any work until much later in the year, at which point, collectively and mutually, we determined that it was too late to do any kind of resident survey, that it was too late to do the type of either opt-in or phone survey that could be scientifically rigorous in order to have a better understanding of where the public stood. Because it was going to be an election year. And the results would be skewed by the political shenanigans that inevitably come up. And B, because it could be misconstrued as something intended to promote some political candidate or other.
all right, so just,
So, no,
oh,
please.
sorry.
And so we abandoned that particular aspect of it and decided that we would focus on our internal communications, how our communications function in our community service department was working with other departments. And thus far, my understanding, and I haven't been intimately involved in the process of this, but my understanding is that there have been some depth interviews that have been conducted internally. There may be more things that Burgess & Burgess has been doing that I'm not specifically aware of. But again, just want to make it clear, this is not a survey. There has been no poll. This is a strategy firm that works with public entities in addition to other clients, but works with public entities in order to achieve public improvement.
So can I just be clear here? So you modified the contract to be just internal only, and so no resident survey, right? Because the contract says residents, 1,000 residents.
I guess if we were in court, it would have been asked and answered. I think that, you know, I thought I was clear. We modified our understanding of the scope of work mutually in order to let that particular aspect of the proposal go from the contract and from the work that we expect to receive from Burgess and Burgess.
Okay, so no residents, internal. Go ahead.
Well, an elected official was surveyed.
If I could stop for a second, I did not say no residents internal. What I said was we are not doing polling, we are not doing a survey. What we are doing is depth interviews, and our concentration is our internal communication function here.
So maybe some residents.
As I said, I'm not intimately involved in the detailed work that our outside consultant is doing.
Okay, go ahead. I mean, I just
Well,
thought
it
this.
specifically says if the scope of work is changing, that the mayor has to agree to that. And if any of the fees change, that the mayor has to agree to it. There's 7 items in the scope of work, 2 relate to the communications firm. I think we need to be reminded that the body of work that Burgess and Burgess does is political campaign consulting. They do some regular strategy work for municipalities. A lot of times it's done for campaigns. We asked specifically if there were surveys going on. This really should have been, and we were told no. On 2 occasions, these were public meetings that council members had. We should have been told of this.
I'm sorry.
Hold on one second. Go ahead, finish up.
I'm still speaking here.
Yeah, go ahead.
But point of inquiry, I guess, when you say survey, maybe you could explain exactly what you mean, because the way that you're using it, I thought I was clear. We are not surveying. We are not polling.
I talked to an elected official that's going to disagree with that statement, who was surveyed.
So maybe, again, point of inquiry, could you please explain what you mean when you say the word survey?
Well, we can define the way Burgess and Burgess uses it. It's probably
I'm asking you,
the
Councilman.
term.
I'm asking you for your definition of
No,
this word.
I'm not answering your questions right now. Okay, what I'm trying to do is ask my questions and talk to my counsel here, my peers. The issue here is the word survey is probably on at least every other page and repeated multiple times on the scope of work. There's clearly survey work that is being done. I was told, I'm using the royal we and I shouldn't in this regard. We were told, my elected friend who shared this information with me mentioned that the employee part of the surveys were complete and was already shared with council. Well, nothing has been shared with council. And frankly, when we were talking about surveys, there's so many use of the word surveys in this document. When we were asking if a survey was being done, we should have been told yes. And because at the time, the Public Safety Committee has been looking at a survey that Shaker was doing. We thought it was very, very helpful. It was political in no way. We wanted to recreate this. And it's a survey that the city of Cleveland Heights has done, and the last time it was done in 2020. And the value of that survey is you repeat the survey and you get additional information. You sort of learn about best practices. You learn where your weaknesses are. You learn where your strengths are. And you said weirdly that we would not do it as from the administration perspective because it would be political this year. Where in fact we're looking at a scope of work that a political strategist is doing for the city. We're asking you if any survey work is being done on 2 occasions, and I just found out about this when a resident who is not anonymous shared this with me about a week ago. What's also troubling is there's a $50,000 threshold before things can be approved, but before you need council approval. It's very suspicious that this contract is $48,000. And it's also suspicious when you actually look at the contract, it actually says the survey work is gonna be billed, is not included in this cost, it's not included in the fee and we'll be billing you at your cost. Well, I mean, maybe some lawyer is gonna be able to make a case, well, it's not a $50,000 contract, it's only $48,000. But in reality, this project is costing over $50,000. So, here I am showing up to this meeting tonight, with red flags galore, looking at, accusations that have been made, hear about a survey, and frankly, misled about such a survey, which is I think all my peers were, and I'm just bothered by it. This is something I intended to bring up at the Finance Committee meeting, and we just ran out of time, okay? Which is a whole nother agenda item, which I'd love to talk about this
That's not
this
on the
evening.
agenda though.
The Finance Committee meeting update is on the agenda.
Oh, my bad.
And I'm glad, I don't know who put the Burgess and Burgess item on.
No, I said I did.
I know, so, it's on, and I was prepared to talk about it earlier today, so I'm talking about it now. I don't know what you have to say about it, but I am really bothered. I felt like I've been lied to.
Thank you, Councilman, for letting us know how you feel. I think that, again, I would like to remind people that it might be wise to reach out and maybe inquire with people who are involved in the contracting process, can provide you with some actual information about contracts that we enter into at the city instead of relying, again, on internet rumors about what the contracts mean. So let me explain to you a little bit. And I certainly feel very comfortable allowing the law director to provide you with more authoritative understanding of the contracting process and what that contract indicates. So as I said, in the context where we were discussing a resident satisfaction survey of the kind that you've just referenced that the city of Cleveland Heights has done multiple times in the past and repeats every so often. And currently you are referencing a survey that the city of Shaker Heights is engaging in currently or has just engaged in. In the context of that discussion, I advised council that the administration would not be pursuing a resident satisfaction survey in or near an election year because we felt that it would be misconstrued and because the data that we would receive would be skewed by the fact that we were in the midst of an election and political season. I was very clear about that, and I have repeated that on multiple occasions to council members in private and in public. That has not changed. I know that council members, I don't know that it's a majority of council, and council has not taken action on this, but council members have expressed a desire to engage in exactly that kind of survey this year. I advise against it during those conversations. And now, in the course of this contract, when we began discussion in the middle of 2024, there was envisioned the possibility of doing the kind of survey, the kind of polling, the kind of resident satisfaction inquiry that you are discussing now. The fact that we got closer to an election year led us to abandon that particular piece of this scope of work. This is not a complicated line of reasoning. And it is exactly what I explained to council about why the administration is not interested in doing a resident satisfaction survey at this time. There has been no resident satisfaction or other widespread survey. There have been depth interviews to discuss the new form of government, how our communications function in our community service department is working both for departments and externally. And that is the focus and the goal of the work that Burgess & Burgess is doing, primarily in connection with our community services department. Now,
We gotta wrap this up.
we have to wrap it up, but I need
I'm
to.
gonna hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I understand. What I think is inappropriate in this conversation is that when I've been very clear about what we are not doing, the councilman is, I guess you could say, if you're parsing words, not exactly accusing the administration of lying, but it's close enough in this moment to possibly be a breach of decorum, Council President. But I will say this, without bringing up a point of order or anything like that, that I'm being very clear now. In the face of an accusation by the councilman that we're being deceitful about the work that a contractor is doing for the city, which is extremely innocuous and something that they've done for other municipalities. It, again, as with the implications about the law director, also calls into question the ethics of, the entire administration that is working on this work, on Burgess & Burgess as a company. And I think that is problematic in a wide variety of ways. And I would ask the councilman to reflect on his statements and pull those back and provide an apology to the people's characters that you are denigrating right now.
I just received, okay, so my phone is lighting up, which is kind of fun. So I'm not gonna use a name here, but it's
Public record,
basically,
Councilman, it's public record.
someone of this organization said that she was surveyed by phone and was told that they were representing the mayor.
I'm sorry, could you provide
Wait, you know
that
what, just
public
listen.
record to the law department?
Let him finish first. and then-
When I get a copy of all the amended scope of works on this, I'd be more than happy to. Of course, if it's official, I'd be more than happy to do it. But this contract in October screams survey. We're doing a survey. We're conducting this. We're conducting that. I mean, what you've told me in your answer is I don't understand about contracting, and you repeated we're not going to do a resident satisfaction survey when I know now multiple people have actually had these things done.
Okay.
So
I
so maybe you can provide us a scope of work, the most recent scope of work.
How about this?
From
How about
Burgess
this?
& Burgess?
How about this? Instead of that, perhaps instead of relying on anonymous texters,
I don't know.
and again, I guess I'm going to make a request for you to provide that record, if you please could. Thank you, because I think that it's important for you to understand the work that's being done will be public record. It will be provided right now.
Yes.
They are in the process of doing what they call depth interviews. Now, a survey is a specific kind of data collection tool. They are not doing a survey. They are doing depth interviews. We have abandoned, again, I've said this unequivocally. Obviously, you have determined that I am untrustworthy, as Drew Herzig put it. And in this moment, I'm not exactly sure how I can prove a negative when you've got anonymous texters telling you that somebody representing the mayor is doing what you won't define. This term that you're using, survey, that you don't have a definition for, at least not one that you're willing to give. And I've clearly stated that Burgess & Burgess is doing depth interviews about a particular administrative function. And I'm really curious as to the nature of your accusation here? Like, what are you getting at? What's the goal?
Well, you don't have to answer that, but
Doesn't.
no, I mean, I'm not going to make them, but
I mean, it would be edifying, I think, for the public.
but I do want to call on a couple more people because we're kind of timed out here. Jim Petrus.
Thank you. So looking at the scope of work, number 3, it says implementing an opt-in online survey that is available to the broader community, advertised via social channels, email, and earned media. The goal is at least 1,000 responses. While not necessarily a statistically accurate sample, it would provide important data from a highly motivated cohort. So I have 2 questions. So firstly, am I understanding correctly that that's the thing that we are hearing has been removed from the scope of work?
That is one of the things that have been removed from the scope of work. Well, actually, you know what? The misunderstanding that I think your internet person or non-anonymous, whoever it was that you did not identify, has some concerns about, is a section that is not actually in the scope of work, but is envisioned as a possible addition that we also abandoned. So opt-in online survey of people and phone survey, both mutually abandoned by Burgess and Burgess and the city of Cleveland Heights because we felt that it would be misconstrued as political and because the actual data that we would receive would be skewed by the fact that we were in a vicious and unfortunate political environment during an election.
Okay, and so this contract says that the work is going to cost $48,000. Are we still paying $48,000 if numerous things have been canceled from the scope of work?
Well, I think that we are paying for the work that we are receiving. Whether that ends up being the full not to exceed or not is yet to be determined. The work isn't done.
It says our fee for this process is $48,000. So if we're removing things from the scope of work, am I hearing that we're not going to pay them $48,000?
I don't have an answer to that right now. I think that that would be something that I would have to discuss both with finance, law, and Burgess and Burgess.
Okay, have there been any addendums to this that have changed the scope of work?
I don't know about the scope of work.
I'm not aware of any.
There haven't been any period.
I'm sorry?
There haven't been any amendments to the
No,
contract.
this was just a mutual agreement between the city of Cleveland Heights and Burgess to remove that from our actual activities.
So, I mean, I guess that leads to a good question. Do we typically, when there are changes to contracts, not update the contract, but just rely on maybe a phone conversation?
And just to follow up on that, Mr. Law Director, if a contract is in writing, don't you have to amend it in writing? Isn't that kind of the general practice?
Yes, that's the general practice. Again, I asked earlier if this had been distributed, because you're asking me questions about a document
I know
that
you
I
said-
haven't looked at in a long
okay.
time. I'm happy to do that, but there's a limit to how much I can speak to.
I'm sorry, I realized I just did something I said I wasn't.
I'll tell you this, I don't know if the council is aware of this. But the administration has been extremely busy for the first 3 months of this year.
I've heard
Focused on some pretty specific things. And the mutual agreement to abandon both one thing that is only envisioned as a possibility for future expenditure and the opt-in online survey that is not a scientific survey and clearly would be something that would be slightly instructive, but not in the same way that a scientific survey would be, has not been done. And I think that it might be something for the council to remember. I mean, we've got a claim that apparently one council member has gotten an invitation to do a survey. I don't know if the councilwoman clicked whatever link she was texted or if she would at this point be willing to provide me with that public record.
I clicked on the record. I showed it to all council members when we were at the council meeting on my phone.
Okay,
So
so
I did, so it's not alleged. It
would
was
you
actually there.
be willing to provide that to the administration?
Sure.
Because if there is an entity out there positioning themselves as the city of Cleveland Heights, I think that we should know about it because I can assure you, we have not done an opt-in online survey. So if you click the link, again, like I said to you when you brought it
That's why I
up,
said it's.
you should probably talk to the scam squad at the county. And you should certainly submit that to our IT professionals here at the city so that we can get to the bottom of who is misrepresenting themselves as the city.
Mayor,
So I
I
know we love this place. and I
I
want to see
asked
her-
a question about the survey. First of all, if I get a text stating there's a survey from Cleveland Heights, my first thing is to ask Cleveland Heights, are you doing a survey?
Yes.
You didn't say that they were doing a survey or not. You simply said, if they're doing a survey, provide your email, provide your social security number and bank account.
No, that
As a
wasn't all I
joke.
said.
As a
That
joke.
wasn't all I said.
That was as a joke.
Did
And
you
I
do
said
it?
it wasn't funny. No, I didn't.
Okay.
And I said, I was asking, and then you gave me all of those other avenues to go through. And I said, the reason I'm asking, because I needed to know if a survey was being done.
And I said
But I-
definitively that we did not.
Okay, so I showed all the council members at the council meeting, it's on tape that everybody saw, it was the actual survey link from Cleveland Heights. Also, so are you saying, and I'm just gonna finish with this, so if no resident can come in here and say that they have not had a interview survey with Burgess regarding the city?
No, what
And
I
no
have just told you
employee-
several times throughout this conversation is that Burgess and Burgess is doing depth interviews.
I said interview. You didn't hear me.
Interview survey.
Interview,
I
30
hear your
minutes,
words.
30 minutes. No resident can come in here and say that Burgess has done a 30-minute interview with Burgess and Burgess regarding the city.
Okay, so if I could.
Let me repeat it, just so, because Anthony wasn't sure. So I'm saying, no resident in Cleveland Heights can come to this table and say, I did a 30-minute survey with Burgess and Burgess regarding the city.
So
That's all I'm asking.
again,
And the answer must be no.
I can't speak to what a resident might come in and say. What I can tell you is that Burgess and Burgess has been conducting depth interview with internal people here at the city. And I believe they've maybe started or will start the same type of depth interviews with a few select stakeholders, probably including an elected official that Jim Posh knows,
So, or a
in
resident.
order to assess community expectations, evaluating whether the city is meeting them in a very specific depth interview and not survey method of data collection. This is qualitative information that is being requested. The word survey, especially in the context that is, as it has been discussed by this council, indicates a community satisfaction survey because that is what you were discussing. And I was very clear that I think that it is irresponsible to pursue that course of action in an election year.
Okay, we're mixing words, so I'm
We
gonna
are
leave it
not
alone.
mixing words. I'm being very
So
precise
we're
with
gonna go
my
Cobb, Posh, Maddox.
Here's the,
I didn't want
Go
to
ahead.
talk. I was telling you I was leaving.
Go ahead.
I was trying to.
You were like.
I was letting you know I was gonna have to step out. No.
here is the issue. There is a contract that references that surveys will be done that was executed by you in October of '24 with an upcoming election year. So regardless of the scope of services that are being prepared, the timing of this is bad. But beyond that, when the question was asked whether there was a survey being done, all that we were, in fact, we were never told of Burgess and Burgess, but some of us were aware that there was this contract that said surveys were going to be done. And you said there weren't any surveys being done. I would have expected the response to have been, if one is transparent, that yes, there was a contract executed with Burgess. The scope of that contract has changed, and there are no surveys being done.
Okay.
And earlier, when we started talking about Burgess and Burgess, it's like, what are you talking about? What's the Burgess? We all knew what we were talking about. I don't know why you just weren't upfront about it. This is the first time we've heard that the scope of this service had been changed.
Okay, for one, I don't think that I was discussing the scope of the service with Burgess and Burgess with council in the first place. When council brought up the idea of a community satisfaction survey, I let council know that my opinion of this is that we should not be conducting a community satisfaction survey in an election year for the couple of reasons that I've indicated in this meeting and others multiple times. That has not changed, Councilman. And no, I did not have any anticipation or see any requirement to have a conversation with you about the scope of work of the Burgess and Burgess contract. I have made a decision that a survey of residents, generally an opt-in online survey, is not appropriate for this particular time. Now, I know, especially with the storm of anonymous public records requests, that our law department is overtaxed. I suppose we can get to a change in scope formally in the contract at some point before this service is done. But we will not be conducting an online opt-in survey. We will not be conducting a widespread phone survey of the type that is outlined in that contract. Those things will not happen this year under this contract or any contract that I would support.
So I think what we need to do, and I'm gonna ask the law director, here's something else you to look into.
Good, yeah.
This is not a quick answer thing where you gotta tell us now, yes or no. But could you look into, can council legislate that we get to see all contracts, whether they're.
I've already done that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but let me finish the sentence because not everybody who's listening knows what I'm gonna say at the end of the sentence. The council could see all contracts executed by the city regardless of how much money they're for.
So I think that's a much more straightforward question than some of them. I don't think there's any impediment to council if it chose to, by ordinance, making such a
I
requirement.
submitted a
Because
draft.
frankly,
That which may or may not relate, to the requirement for council approval. That's not exactly what you said, right? So.
right, I mean, we
you have
can't
the
get in a
approval
time machine.
Threshold, and then you have a visibility question that you're raising now.
And just so you know, I did submit a draft legislation around
I
that.
actually remember you bringing this up at a meeting.
Correct. The interview, I understand from a text message I just received that the directors and the top staff were interviewed. The mayor's wife was in the interviews with Burgess and Burgess. There was an in-person interview. The results said something like, and I will not read what it said, and there was an incident with the lady who was on administrative leave, and I'm not gonna read the rest of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna request that public record as well.
You sure will.
Thank you.
So, can we get the results of the Burgess and Burgess interviews from the directors and staff, since
You said
those
it would
are
be public
complete,
record, right?
since they're all completed?
Two things. The work product from Burgess and Burgess will be public record when it is provided to the city. So that's first of all. Second of all, I can equivocally state that whoever this person is that is texting you is, I'm gonna be generous and say incorrect about the assertion that the First Lady was involved in those depth interviews from Burgess and Burgess.
She didn't say that.
Okay.
She said that she was in the interview, she was in the meeting when the results were given from Burgess and Burgess.
I'm sorry, what results?
The results from, not the surveys, from the directors and staff interviews. Burgess and Burgess gave results, which your wife was involved in the meeting. And the results, which I'm not gonna state out loud, were not favorable. And that caused a chain of reaction.
Okay, yes,
But I will send you
would
that.
absolutely love to see that public
You're
record.
Well, I guess we'll have to see that. You know what, I'm gonna have you probably be the last word, and then I will beg people to, maybe wait on the last two agenda items. I understand. I said 8 o'clock and we didn't do it. Go ahead.
Well, I do appreciate the fact that you've really tried your best to try to inform the public that I really don't know what the word survey means. But I will tell you, Dan Hines, I am talking right now, Mayor. The Dan Hines is the elected official I was referring to. I didn't want to use his name without getting permission because that's the appropriate thing to do.
Well, I wouldn't know who they
He was surveyed, okay? Just saying. I also have other information which you're more than welcome to have. It basically reads, the whole contract was paid in the amount of $48,000. One third of the contract wasn't going to be conducted. So I guess I don't understand that, if there's no scope of work changes, even though it says that the mayor has to approve all scope of work changes, I'm a little surprised that the whole contract was actually paid. And then I see we have all 6 invoices paid in the amount of $8,000 each. So I would like to see those invoices just to see if that was paid, and I'd like to see if there's any scope of work changes, knowing that the mayor has to approve those scope of work changes.
Councilman, I would just say on that point about there have been no scope of work, there have been no amendments to the contract. However, also there's sort of this idea that there's a lawyer following everyone in City Hall around and watching to see when we need to change something. We're really not. As lovely as people would find that, we don't do that. And so when things are brought to us to discuss and to follow up on and to make amendments to contracts, we try to be responsive and handle that. But at this point, there have been no amendments.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you.
We do have a couple more 6 and 7 on here. I'd like to forego doing them, except I would like to end with, Mayor, do you have any plans about searching for a new city administrator? Are there any plans right now, or do you want to just wait on that and discuss that another time?
Well, one thing that I've been advised about is to, I think I've discussed this with council previously, hire slow, fire fast, yeah? You guys remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, this is not exactly the nature of the public records request process, Councilwoman Russell.
I understand that, sir.
If you would
I'm very much
provide,
aware of that. I will send it to you by email. I just wanted you to see it right then.
actually, if you would provide it maybe through the law.
I will do that.
And then we can log it.
Mayor, I am very much aware of that, yes.
And that would include the metadata, and attendant
Mayor,
information.
Mayor,
about the text.
I understand that. Thank you.
And that goes for the information from Councilman Posh as well. Thank you. All right, so, I am interested, again, as I stated in my initial statement about, finding the right teammate, finding somebody who is a good fit. It's important that somebody has the requisite skills. It is important that somebody has the appropriate temperament. And it's important that somebody is ready and willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work with me. I'm not somebody who shies away from the hard work of this job, and I expect that other people on this journey with me will do the same. No leaving early every day, or those sorts of things. And so I'm interested in first the process of taking a look at previous applicants, and if there are some that I might want to reach back out to that we didn't pursue before, I'd be interested in having some more conversations. I also plan on putting a job posting out and publicizing it, and looking for, as one does, an appropriate partner in this particular position. I don't know what else there is to say.
No,
about-
that's good.
Okay. Sort of a
Just to
first.
know your intentions. Go ahead, Councilman Angus.
Oh.
Can't say no to you.
And I guess this is probably a question should have been asked earlier in connection with HR. Do you have any plans to hire an HR director? And do we have someone in our HR department currently that is a qualified HR specialist?
So first thing, I'm not going to be discussing individual personnel in this context. I think that's sort of a first sort of boundary here. So I'm not gonna talk about, candidates for any particular position in this forum. I think that's disrespectful and problematic when it comes to people's privacy. There's a reason why the council goes into executive session to discuss its appointment decisions and discussing individual candidates, and I'm going to adhere to those same principles. So that's first of all. Second of all, to address your first question, I believe that it is important right now for us to investigate creating an actual HR department that the city has never had before, and fleshing out what that looks like. I believe we have highlighted a particular new employee who has some expertise, who is currently in our law department. We have a new assistant law director who has a great deal of human resources experience, and as an attorney has been pretty valuable as well here at the city. And I think their experience in multiple departments of human resources throughout her career will be helpful in designing an effective and efficient department, of what I would like to call a Department of Employee Resources.
Any follow-up?
I don't know, did I answer your question?
You answered the question about, no, we do not have an HR director. You told us your plan, but my question about, do we have someone in our HR department, and I can request the personnel files, that has HR certifications?
Oh my goodness, okay, so.
That's what I'm trying to.
He wasn't asking for a name.
I understand that, but it's difficult.
Well, you
So-
don't understand that.
No,
Because you answered it as if he was
No, I
asking for a
understand
name.
it now.
Oh,
and that
got
he's
it.
not asking for
I'm
a
sorry
name.
if I was imprecise. I'm not asking for a name. I'm just asking, do we have a person that has HR qualifications?
Okay, so for one, I would like to remind the council member that at the request of your vice president, council has received all of the names, positions, and salaries of all of the employees as a result of the budget conversation. And yet I was still talking, so you have the names and positions of the individuals that are in our HR function right now. The difficulty in responding to your question is kind of the difficulty that is faced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics when they're talking about businesses in a very small, microeconomy, like a city like ours, where you can't actually provide some data without being extremely revealing about any particular employee. You've got 2 employees doing HR work here. So if I make a comment about the general HR employee, you can very, very easily decide who I'm discussing. I think that if you'd like, you certainly can request the people's personnel information. If you'd like, it is public record, but we don't generally proactively proclaim that to the skies in public meetings on camera because, again, it is disrespectful of employee privacy to have these kinds of discussions in this kind of setting. And I would ask you, as we discussed earlier, that we should sit down and talk. I still have an open invitation to people to meet with me on a regular basis, you included, and we can have these kinds of discussions in a way that is respectful.
Well, I looked at the information you referenced, and I saw the highest compensated person that I saw in our HR department is identified as a payroll specialist or something to that effect.
Incorrect. And in fact, I believe that I have informed council that we have an assistant director for the HR function named Tanya Jones. We've had this conversation about the structure of our HR function already, that there is an assistant director who is our HR lead. The assistant director, since we do not and have never had a Department of Human Resources, that function historically has been a function of the city manager's office. I thought that it was appropriate to remove HR from the mayor's office because of the potential intimidation that that might create for an employee who has to walk into the mayor's suite in order to have a conversation with HR. And so physically, I removed HR from the mayor's suite to avoid that kind of intimidation proactively and placed that function under HR, which is not completely unheard of because in fact, Andy Unetic had spent years in Painesville leading finance and HR. And this was something that we were working on. I've decided that it is a better bet for us to create a department, a standalone department, in order to address these issues and handle these functions. I've outlined to you my process for that, and that is to go through a process of designing that department to work effectively with our new assistant law director who has a great deal of HR experience. I don't know, perhaps I'm having trouble answering your question because I don't understand your question.
You've answered my question. If you would have just said that's the person you identified earlier, instead you said, oh, look at the records that I provided for you earlier.
I really would have preferred to avoid having a conversation about a specific employee in a public session. That would have been my preference, and I would have loved to have had that conversation with you privately, Councilman.
All right, well, I appreciate this. I hope everybody was at least somewhat enlightened by this conversation. I know it was not an easy one. I would imagine that, maybe at the next committee of the whole meeting, there are a couple of things we weren't able to go over. If we can't do it then, we'll figure out another venue because I do want to finish this agenda. I just don't want to do it tonight, if that's okay with everybody. Public, thank you. Monday, I know we don't have public comments at special meetings. Monday, we will have public comment, and we want to hear from anybody who wants to make public comments. So that'll be this coming Monday, April 7th at 7:30. This meeting is adjourned at 8:31.